In this video, I explained why a big letter Z or Z is painted on Russian tanks, armored vehicles, and personnel carriers. Hello, friends. This is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. Now, everyone must have noticed a big letter Z prominently painted on most Russian tanks, armored vehicles, and personnel carriers. It took me some time to realize why. It has to do with the stated objective of denazification of Ukraine, as mentioned by President Putin of Russia in his speech announcing the special Russian military operation inside Ukraine. Of course, by now most people may have figured out that Z stands for Zelensky, the 44-year-old president of Ukraine, who claims he is of Jewish descent. He claims that his father was the only one of four brothers to survive the Holocaust. One can make up any stories about the Holocaust which may be difficult to verify. If the story about Zelensky's background were true, it is difficult to explain why President Putin, a Jew himself, would send in the Russian army to Ukraine with a big Z painted on almost every tank, armored vehicle, and personnel carrier. Zelensky must have taken some action for the Russian army to come gunning for him. It is impossible to believe that a Jew would send in armies to take down another innocent Jew and his family. But it's easy to put two and two together from President Putin's speech. President Putin's stated goal in his speech for the special military operation in Ukraine was to denazify Ukraine, and the number one task of the Russian military is to liquidate Zelensky. There is no mistaking the conclusion that Vladimir Zelensky is a Nazi, a German masquerading as a Jew in Ukraine. I am sure Russia has much better intelligence on Ukraine than anyone else, except perhaps the Germans, who have the help of German masqueraders in Ukraine. Once we arrive at the logical conclusion that Zelensky is a Nazi, a lot of the pieces of the puzzle of why Russia invaded Ukraine fall into place. Zelensky is also not an ordinary Nazi, he is a rabid Nazi. When one outwardly claims to be of Jewish background and then also claims to be a Nazi for the Germans, the person has to demonstrate that he's a Nazi by deeds. He has to meet the German hurdle qualification. And that hurdle qualification for Zelensky would have been to murder a Jew or an ethnic Ukrainian. Zelensky must have met that hurdle qualification to have been rewarded with numerous gigs in the entertainment industry, even though he's a lawyer, and then with the presidency of Ukraine. Zelensky is staying in Ukraine despite the offer of the United States to help him get out. But he is not staying in Ukraine because he's a patriot. He is staying there because he obeys Satan the devil like all rabid Nazis do. Germany won't accept him like it did not accept another rabid Nazi, Alexei Navalny of Russia, who was sent back to Russia after treatment for poisoning. The reason was that Satan had ordered about 20 years ago that German masqueraders must stay in their countries and not flee to Germany after they were discovered. They obey him without question. That is also further solid proof that Zelensky is a rabid Nazi. Of course, Satan's war strategy is to use all these German masqueraders to start a civil war in the countries of which they are citizens. That's why Zelensky has been ordered by the Germans not to leave Ukraine. Now, my estimate is that more than 50% of those claiming to be Jews in the United States are actually German masqueraders. I would not be surprised if that's the case in Ukraine as well. Zelensky being a German masquerading as a Jew is not sufficient reason for President Putin to send in Russian troops to take him and others close to him down in the government, Ukrainian military, economy, and the media, who control the levers of power as well as the means to wage anti Russian propaganda. They were planning to implement some of their anti Russian plans immediately that warranted swift action from President Putin. What Zelensky was planning to implement has also been very clearly stated by President Putin in his speech. Mr. Putin stated that special military operations were being launched for the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. Zelensky and those around him, being rabid Nazis, explains Russia's objective of denazification of Ukraine. If the Nazis are not removed from power, they will continue their activities to militarize and nuclearize Ukraine and pose a threat to Russia. That explains why Russia wants to denazify Ukraine. Demilitarization of Ukraine as a goal of the special operations became necessary for Russia because Zelensky and the Nazis around him were planning to attack the Donbass region and destroy the ethnic Russian rebels controlling that territory. Preventing nuclearization of Ukraine as one of Russia's goals was stated by the US media reporting on information from Mr. Putin's speeches. That would be included in President Putin's overall goal of demilitarization of Ukraine. Now, during negotiations before and after Ukraine's independence, Ukraine agreed to give up its nuclear weapons with a guarantee from Russia that it will not attack Ukraine with nuclear weapons and will also protect it from nuclear attack. The United States and the United Kingdom were also party to that guarantee. But if the Nazis in Ukraine were close to starting the development of nuclear weapons, in reality, Germany would supply them the technology which would enable the installation of nuclear weapons in a few months, as has happened in India with German and Chinese assistance. Now, Ukraine already has the necessary trained scientists from their Soviet Union days, whereas in India they had to be trained virtually from scratch. So, uh, uh, if the Nazis in Ukraine were close to starting the development of nuclear weapons, Russia had no choice but to act, as Ukraine would have violated the terms of the agreement for its independence. Therefore, Russia invading Ukraine was not an obscene and naked display of its power, but an absolute necessity to avert an existential threat about to be created by Germany and China in collaboration with Nazis who control the government in Ukraine. Germany already has its nuclear weapons and missiles in China. Then why would it want to install more in Ukraine? The reasons are likely twofold. First, the Germans and the Chinese allies use the tactic to divide people and inveigle them to destroy themselves. Arming them with nuclear weapons is one of their tactics. China wants to destroy Korea and take over its land. South Korea is a formidable country, so the Chinese have supplied nuclear weapons to North Korea, which it tries to then inveigle into using them against South Korea and unite the country under their rule. But they know that South Korea is not a pushover and will fight back. The result will be the Koreas nearly destroying each other, and then China can walk in. North Korea does not have the technological capabilities to manufacture and maintain nuclear weapons on its own. China has supplied them to North Korea. Now, Germany has made many attempts to destroy the Sikhs and Punjabis of North India. Therefore, they, along with China, have supplied nuclear weapons and missile technology to South Indians allied with them and hope to persuade them sometime in the very near future to use them against the Punjabis and Sikhs to destroy them. That is the reason Germany wants to supply nuclear weapons technology to Ukraine and build nuclear weapons and missiles to use them against Russia under the guise of self defense. That way, the Ukrainians and Russians will destroy each other as both fought the Germans during the Second World War. The second reason for installing nuclear weapons in Ukraine is that China does not want to launch nuclear weapons against Russia if the need arises from its own soil, as it will then be attacked by Russia. It would be better to use them from Ukrainian soil, as Russia would then attack Ukraine. In all these events, the only one telling the truth is President Putin of Russia. Only Russia, the United States, and Germany and China have the capability to gather good enough intelligence to be able to determine exactly what is going on. Other nations make statements based on what they can actually see on the ground. They cannot see Germany's behind the scenes machinations to install nuclear weapons in Ukraine to be used against Russia. But Russia can see that. I believe the United States can also see it. But the German masqueraders in the United States and UK government seem to have control of the propaganda apparatus and toe the German line. That's why they will not tell the truth. Only President Putin and Russia have to tell the truth to make a case for their actions in Ukraine. In my opinion, Russia's goal in its present actions in Ukraine has never been to conquer Ukraine and occupy it and force its assimilation into the Russian Federation. But for propaganda purposes, Germany, the United States, and UK accuse Russia of that. All other nations who lack the necessary intelligence to see what is really going on also accuse Russia of naked aggression based on what they see. Thus, Russia is being isolated, dubbed a naked aggressor, and unjustly punished with all the sanctions imposed on it, while the true instigators and aggressors, the Germans, are getting away scot free. Though it is too early to tell, the war does not seem to be going according to plan for Russia. It is severely tied down because of the necessity of avoiding civilian casualties, whereas Ukrainian fighters can use civilians as human shields. President Putin seems to be caught between a rock and a hard place. If Russia begins taking too many casualties, fighting could become ugly on both sides. Most analysts and leaders in nations do not understand the true German goals. Bible prophecy indicates that the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and the State of Israel are to be punished for their sins of violating God's laws, which include the Ten Commandments. That punishment is to come from an alliance headed by Germany. That is the prophecy Germany is trying to fulfill. Therefore, the true German goal is not to fight Russia, but to war against the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Jews in the State of Israel. It has China, Modi's India, and some Muslim nations as allies to help accomplish this goal. They do not want interference from other nations, including Russia, in in their quest to conquer America, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel militarily, enslave their populations, and take over their lands. To help make its strategy as foolproof as possible and give it the maximum chance of success, it has the help of a very large number of German masqueraders. That is, Germany has the help of a very large number of German masqueraders in these countries who are waiting to start a civil war there. These German masqueraders have murdered 9 to 10 million white Americans of non German ancestry in the United States alone. Therefore, they are solidly committed to starting a civil war to save their lives from being put to death for their crimes. That is also the reason Zelensky is staying back in Ukraine to prolong the war against Russia. This is the German strategy to keep Russia occupied for a long time in somewhat bloody war in Ukraine, while with its allies it persecutes its war against the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel. That's why it will continue to supply weapons to Ukraine. Please do not be deceived by the demonization of President Putin by Germany and other nations that are reacting to only what they can see on the ground. Understand the German machinations behind the scenes, which can be reasonably determined from their past actions, as I have been describing in almost all my videos on current affairs. Those sanctions are unlikely to cripple Russia because the world needs its energy supplies and it can commandeer Ukrainian resources. Ukrainian resistance, which will soon begin to be supplied with weapons by Germany, United States, and other Western countries, coupled with Russia's need to avoid civilian casualties, it will definitely prolong the conflict. But the conflict could turn ugly in a hurry if Russia begins taking many casualties, especially when Ukrainian resistance fighters use residential areas to shoot at Russian vehicles and soldiers. Or Russia may choose to continue avoiding civilian casualties even though it prolongs its presence in Ukraine. In doing so, it will succeed in achieving its objective of preventing nuclearization and further militarization of Ukraine and genocide of ethnic Russians rebels in Donbass. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, to view and get information on the latest videos. Some people do not have the time to go through the full length of videos. They find it more convenient to read the text of the video. Unfortunately, YouTube does not provide the facility to make the text of my videos available on YouTube. But fortunately, Facebook does provide that facility. So I make the text of my videos available on my Facebook channel, which you can then easily copy.